Did you use AI? I didn't use AI. I would never use AI for writing. That's just too dangerous.
I'm not trying to tell leaders they're broken. I'm trying to give language to the load they've been calling normal.
You made an assumption. I disagree.
In today's Decision Load, I'm speaking with Pia Lauritzen, a Danish philosopher, author of 6 books, speaker, tech inventor, and known as the Question Philosopher. Her work has been featured through her Forbes column, her courses on LinkedIn Learning, and she was also shortlisted for the Thinkers 50 Radar Award for showing how questions may shape our future. And that matters now, because AI has made answers incredibly cheap. But the responsibility for asking the right question, judging the answer, and owning the consequence still sits with humans. So today's conversation is not about curiosity as a nice leadership trait. It's about what happens when leaders, teams, and AI systems move fast before the real decision question is clear. Hi, Pia. I'm really glad we're doing this. Everyone is talking about AI answers right now. Faster answers, better prompts, and better tools at the end of the day. And some of that is useful, of course. But your work points to something deeper. Maybe the real leverage is still in the question. And I think that matters even more now because we're entering a world where something that sounds like an answer can be generated almost instantly. But faster responses do not automatically mean better thinking, right? And also polished answers do not automatically mean better decisions. So I want to start one step earlier. Why do we rush toward answers before we're clear on the question? Especially now when AI can generate something convincing in a second.
Thank you for inviting me, Marco. It's very, very nice to talk to you. And I'm glad we had this opportunity. I really enjoy that you start out by asking a why question. Why do we rush to the answer? Because I think that allows me to go into maybe a little more deeper explanation than what we usually hear about. Because I basically think it has to do with some kind of existential, maybe fragility, rather than anxiety. But we're fragile in the sense that being in this open space where we don't know the answers yet feels a little bit frightening. And we want to have this solid ground. We want to know, well, this I can say for sure. This is how the world works. And now I can take step 1, 2, 3, and then I will achieve my goal. And that's kind of a nice, also maybe a little bit, I wouldn't say lazy, but it's a convenient way of approaching life. And I think the big tech companies and the technologies that we're using today in the digital age of technology, they are designed to make it easy for us to make that choice and maybe even forget that staying open, being in the question long enough to figure out whether this is the right question or this is the most important question right now or this is a question that will bring us value. It's easy to forget that and to just rush towards the answer, especially when we constantly have these technologies offering answers, even before we even get to ask the question sometimes. So I think that's the explanation to the why. It's because it feels more convenient. It feels more, we feel more confident if we can convince ourselves that there are easy answers. We just need to go and pick them, and then we forget that that's not how it works. That's not what being human means.
Exactly. That's why I wanted to start here, because in the age of AI, something can sound useful quickly, right? But the scarce thing may be the human ability to pause, ask a better question, and understand what we're actually trying to decide. And that brings me to your work. You call yourself the question philosopher, which I love because it makes questions feel serious, not fluffy. So, for people who are new to your work, what does the question philosopher mean in practice?
Well, it's actually a fairly new thing calling myself the question philosopher. I've been working with questions forever, professionally and academically and personally. But I realized at some point that people started calling me tech philosopher because a lot of my recent work have centered around dealing with being human in these technological times, these digital times. And then people just without asking or without even considering whether that was the case or not, just started calling me tech philosopher. I was kind of like, well, I'm not a tech philosopher. I'm not, basically, I'm just a philosopher. I'm not a specific anything. And being a question philosopher is kind of like it's saying the same thing twice because working with questions is what philosophers do. And thinking philosophically is what we do if we stay with the question long enough. So it's just to remind people, please don't make this a question about technology. Please don't turn everything we do today into something that has to do with AI, because that is just such a narrow way of thinking and talking about what it means to be human. So practically, it just means that I keep doing what I do, which is I read, I write, I think, I talk, and it all has to do with being human in this time. And that's what philosophers have always done. And right now, being human has turned out to be more than ever before asking a lot of questions about how technology impacts us. And we have been neglecting that part of the technology discussion for ages. We have been talking about how we can use technology for this, how we can use technology for that, and how we can be more productive and innovative and solve problems and stuff like that. We've been talking about that forever as society, popular, the public debate. But we have not been discussing the existential ethical dimensions of technology, which has to do with how does technology impact us? How is technology using us, our data, our nature, our way of being in the world? And that has come into the public debate with AI. So AI has been this, in this sense, it truly is the very first technology in the history of mankind that has drawn our attention to how technology impacts us. And that's what the question philosopher does right now, is trying to give that as much attention as possible, so that people entering the public debate and forming the public debate has some of the wisdom from the past in taking these discussions, and not assuming that just because this tech founder or this CEO from a big tech company or this Nobel Prize winner it says that now we have an existential threat, or now we have this ethical, and we need brand new philosophers to discuss this. My point is, well, philosophers have been discussing this forever. We just need to start listening. We just need to start learning from how we can have the conversations about these existential, ethical, and epistemological questions that the public debate has not been having for too long. So that's a practical, I don't know how practical it sounds, but it is my everyday job to think and read and write and talk about that.
I like that because it takes questions out of the nice leadership behavior category, right? It's not just let's all be curious, which sounds nice, but often dies by Tuesday, right? It's more practical than that.
Yeah.
As you said, a question changes what people look at. It changes what they avoid. It changes what kind of answers becomes acceptable. So let's bring that into the room. When you listen to leaders ask questions, what do you hear what other people usually miss?
So I would say first and foremost, what most leaders miss when thinking and talking about questions is that they might not be the best ones to ask questions. So I think a lot of leaders have this assumption, also because a lot of researchers and consultants and experts have told them so, that if they want to be more curious and if they want to be more engage more people and empower more people, they need to ask more questions. And I tend to flip the script in the sense saying, if you really want to be more curious, if you really want to empower people to do their own thinking and make their own decisions and take responsibility, then you need to pay attention to the questions they are asking. Because when we humans ask questions, we take a position on what we think is important, on where we should focus. There is a German philosopher called Erwin W. Strauss who said that questions are as revealing as dreams, or even more so. So indicating that if you truly want to know what's going on in another human being, what they really care about and where their motivation lies, then you need to pay attention to the questions they are asking, not the answers they are giving to your questions, but the questions they themselves are asking. What are they asking? Who are they asking? Why are they asking? What are they hoping to achieve? Are there questions they are not asking? And why are they not asking these questions? Sometimes I call it shadow questions. What are the questions that no one is asking, but everybody is hoping for an answer because they need the answer to these specific questions to actually take responsibility and make decisions and make a difference. So that's the biggest blind spot I have noticed when talking to leaders, is that they are simply not enough aware of the questions other people are asking and what they can learn from studying those questions, and how they can use these questions to become better leaders. Because when you know what people are asking, you're way better equipped to actually give them what they need. So it makes so much sense to start to pay attention to the questions other people are asking, whether inside the company or outside the company.
And that's really interesting because most people only hear the words, right? But you're listening to what the question is doing. So
Yes. Yeah, that's a good
who
way
it
of
gives
framing
space
it.
to, who it pressures, who it makes visible, especially in the team, and maybe what it keeps hidden.
Yeah.
So that's where questions become very practical for me and what I do. Because in a company, the question is not just the warm up before the discussion or
Mm,
decision.
mm.
A lot of time, most of the time, the question is where the decision starts taking shape, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, what makes a question actually useful in a leadership room from your perspective? Is it the wording, the timing, the courage, or the context?
I think what as a leader, when you give me these different opportunities or choices, I would say the timing is crucial. The timing of when is it time for me to ask a question? When is it time for me to make room for other people to ask questions? When should I talk? When should I listen? Um, when should none of us ask questions? Because that's another thing. And maybe that it sounds like a paradox. The question philosopher saying sometimes the best thing to do is to not ask any questions and to simply pay attention to the different ways of expressing what's going on. And sometimes that's better done without a question, because we have built this culture of expectations around questions. So a lot of people actually feel that questions are not a space for them to learn and grow. It's a space for them to take a risk. They are afraid that if they ask a question, someone will think, well, that's a bad question, or that's a weird question, or didn't you listen? We already talked about that. So there is a lot of, again, not necessarily anxiety, but a lot of people feel a kind of fear of asking questions. And as a leader, you need to be very aware of that. You need to pay attention, again, to the questions that are not being asked, the things that are not being said, in order to take care of that fear and not assume that if nobody is asking a question, it means that nobody has anything they are in doubt about, skeptical about, curious about. Everybody has what they need, because if they didn't, they would ask a question. That is almost always a false assumption. There are always people in the room who are holding something back. And as a leader, you need to find ways to use questions strategically by saying, as you said, the timing. When is it my turn? When is it someone else's turn? How do I turn this room into a place where we can dance instead of fight? Because that's a good conversation. That's when we dance, when we take turns, when we move a little bit forward and we take a step back and we move to the side to make room for someone else. So thinking about the art of questioning and answering in light of dancing, I would say is the best advice for leaders.
I can relate to that one. That also makes me think about pressure, which I mentioned, because it's sometimes too easy to ask good questions when nothing is on fire, right? But in real companies, people are tired, time is short, customers are waiting maybe, and the board wants an answer. The team is looking upward. So I'm curious, what happens to the quality of the questions when pressure goes up?
Well, it just goes down. I think unless you are really good as a leader to remind yourself that you need mind space to create space for others to learn and grow and make good decisions. If you're constantly in lack of mind space because you're simply there's too much, then you might have a feeling that you're being really productive and you're making really good, very fast decisions. But that's simply not true. Chances are you are running very fast without knowing if you're running for the right things. And even worse, you are creating a culture where the people around you are doing the same thing. So sometimes I get the feeling that people simply don't know or simply don't want to remember, because I think at some level they do know, but they simply don't want to remember that in order to make good decisions, in order to ask good questions and behave in good ways, we simply need space. And the crazy thing is that we think it takes too much time. We think, well, I don't have time to create that space. But sometimes all it takes is a minute. All it takes is a minute to stay completely calm in your head and ask yourself, what is the most important question for me to create some kind of learning around right now? Maybe for myself, maybe for someone else, but giving yourself the task of formulating it as a question, and it only takes a minute. Then most people will be able to actually phrase that question. And just by phrasing the question, you already get a lot of information about where your focus is, what it is that you think is important, and then you can test it with your people, with your colleagues. Do we agree that this is what's important right now? This is where we want to go. This is where we want to run first. And then we might go for something else after that, but right now we just need to focus. And I think that's a big part of the reason why I stopped working with companies and started talking to companies in talks and writing and podcasts like we're doing right now, that's because I simply got the feeling that when I was working with companies, that a lot of people didn't want to make that change. A lot of people didn't feel they could make that change, and I didn't know how to help them. Because if you're just running and you think that's your only choice, that is to run, then you don't have the mind space, the head space to do something else.
Under pressure, the question often gets smaller, right? As you
Yes,
mentioned,
yes,
it becomes, how fast can we fix it? Who can approve this?
yes,
What do we say now?
yeah,
The house is on fire. And
yeah,
those may be necessary, but sometimes the better question is one level deeper.
yeah,
What are we actually deciding
yeah,
at the
yeah,
moment? Or who owns this in the company? What trade-off are we avoiding?
yeah, exactly. What are we not doing when we are so busy doing whatever it is we're doing right now, and how does that impact the longer term task or strategy of our team? And that sounds like big questions, but it's more like a habit. It's more like if you help each other practice. Sometimes I share this very basic, very concrete tip of helping people pay attention to the kind of questions they ask. Because there is my studies of more than 30,000 questions that I've collected across the world shows that we have a tendency in organizations to have a very clear what, how bias. So most of the questions, almost 80% of the questions asked in organizations are what or how questions, which means that we are very busy determining what we should do and how we should do it, and then we just run. Whereas when we ask, we can ask the same question, actually, it could be about the same thing. Let's say it's about how do we become more productive. You could just rephrase the question and say, why is it important that we become more productive? And some people say, well, that goes without saying. Okay, but then skip that for a moment. Then ask, when is it important that we get more productive? When is it not important? When is it actually part of the value we deliver that we are not focusing on productivity, but on value or connection or creativity or something else? To whom is it important that we get more productive? Because sometimes we think it's important for everyone, but it's not. Some people don't want us to be more productive. They want us to pay more attention, or they want us to take more care of whatever it is. So just helping teams help each other rephrase some of their questions can actually be a very quick, easy way to create a little more space in how we think and talk about these things.
That's exactly why and how I operate, because looking from my lens, my point of view, decision stability in general, people usually ask, how can I fix it? And what can we do next? But no one ever asks, why did this come back up again?
Yeah.
So
yeah. Exactly. And that's a great question, right? We need to figure out. Because if we don't know why this keep coming back, how are we ever going to change it, right? Then it will just be repeating.
Exactly. And people learn how to live with it, right? High pressure situation, you
that's
just go with
true.
the flow until you're overworked and burn out.
That's true.
Especially in today's day and age. And in a way, that's where pressure is interesting to me, because pressure does not only test our answers, it does as well, but also, as you said, it tests the quality of the question we are willing to ask.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, that's
in
a good
your
way
opinion,
of framing it. Yeah.
How can leaders then protect the quality of questions when everyone wants speed?
Well, I think they can start by questioning that assumption that everyone wants speed. I think that's an assumption that we just uncritically adopted. And a lot of leaders uncritically adopt it. But I have the pleasure of knowing some of the highest executives and board chairmen of boards, and people who really have a lot of decision power. And most of these people are not, they actually, when you sit down with them, you look them in the eyes, it's not like they always want speed or they always want what it sounds like we want. Sometimes we just borrowed that way of talking from different industries, very powerful industries, like, the big tech companies, for instance. And sometimes they share the same observations, the same worries that the rest of us, the middle managers and the people like, you and me, and people working in organizations. Of course, they share the same observations. They have children too. They have grandchildren too. They don't want to see them grow up in a world where they have no chance of success because they will be burned out before they even get their first job. So I think that's the very first thing to do. No matter where in the hierarchy you find yourself, question the assumption that whatever it is that you think, you cannot allow yourself or afford to question, do it anyway. Because chances are someone else will thank you for it. Maybe not directly, but by pausing or by shifting their perspective a little bit. And we need to make it easier for each other to do that. I just have a lot of trust that if people start listening more to their own thinking and their own assumptions and questioning whatever it is that comes from the outside, then we will figure it out.
Yeah, and that connects to something I wanted to ask you, because I've seen this in companies and I think it's very human. And question can sound smart, right? But sometimes it is also a way of not taking responsibility. So let me ask it directly. Can a question sound smart, but actually be a way of not taking responsibility?
Yes, but then I would say, then it's not asking, then it's not having a question mindset. Then it's taking questions as a hostage. It's using questions to manipulate or to demonstrate something or to make other people think the same way you do. When you have a question mindset, I did a LinkedIn learning course titled "Unlock Your Question Mindset to Think Clearly and Navigate Uncertainty," and that's I think is a 12-session learning course on how to remind ourselves that when we ask questions, when we have a question mindset, then we are not smart. We are the opposite in the sense that we're not sounding smart. We are sounding curious or searching, or, we're trying to figure things out. And that's why we sometimes refrain from doing that, because we don't want to risk sounding stupid, or we don't want to risk sounding like we don't know what we're doing, especially when you reach our age. I'm not sure it's the same age, but when you're an adult, then it's like we think that other people expect us to know, and we expect ourselves to know. So the second we ask a question demonstrating that this is something I don't know, this is something I want to know, then we're afraid that people will say, well, then you're not who I thought you were, or you're not capable of taking care of this position, or whatever it is. So I think maybe it's a good test. If my question makes me sound like I know a lot of things and I'm being the smart one in the room, then I should not ask it. Because the whole point of asking a question should be, now I'm sharing a vulnerability. I'm sharing a gap in my knowledge. There's something I don't know that I would like to know. So there's a gap. And I'm trusting you to take care of that. That's why I'm asking you, because I know you're a human being and you know the feeling. So maybe we can explore this gap, this space. Maybe you have an answer. Then I can just say, thank you. Maybe you don't. And then we can both learn and grow. So I think yes, of course you can use questions for whatever you want, but if you want to have a truly gain something from it yourself and help people around you gain something from it, you need to develop a question mindset that is much more fragile.
I find that part really interesting because in a company, a question is never just a question. It always does something. It moves attention, at least. It changes the pressure. And sometimes very quietly, though, it moves responsibility away from the person who should probably own it, right?
Yeah. But it's a good observation that questioning is closely related to responsibility. The studies I made in my postdoctoral research was finding out if different language communities have different ways of using questions. And what I realized was that there are three basic ways of using questions to distribute responsibility. In some parts of the world, we use questions to take responsibility. So I ask a question and it's to show you that I already know the answer. I'm just trying to test if you know the same thing or if you don't. So that's one way of asking and using questions in terms of responsibility. In other parts of the world, we do it the exact opposite way. So I ask a question to impose responsibility on someone else. So I ask you a question and now it's your responsibility to come up with a response. So I'm not testing your knowledge. I'm actually trusting you to take on the task and come up with a response and be responsible for that response. And then there is a third way, which is asking a question, but doing it in a way where I say, well, I'm not responsible. You're not responsible. We are responsible for finding out what is the answer. And actually, it's the third way that serves leaders, in most cases, serves leaders best. If you can find a way to ask questions that motivates the people you're asking into exploring with you. So you're offering, I'm not asking to test you. I'm not asking to tell you that I already know and I just, I am responsible. I'm not asking you to say, now it's your turn. You're responsible. I don't want to be part of it. No, I'm actually asking because I think you and I together can come up with a solution that's way better than if I do it or you do it. That's the ideal way of using questions in organizations as far as I can see.
But that's also where smart questions can become dangerous, right? Because not because they're bad questions, but because they can keep the room feeling intelligent while the decision is still homeless. So in a way, maybe the real test is, did this question create clarity or did it just make avoidance sound thoughtful? In your opinion, where does curiosity become delay?
If it's truly curiosity, then it probably has some kind of connection also to doubt or to skepticism. That is, sometimes they talk about the big question family, because we tend to forget that we like to talk about curiosity and creativity because that's the nice cousins in the family, right? That's the one we want to join at a party. But they're closely related to skepticism, to doubt, to uncertainty. That's a big question family. And if curiosity is doing her job, so to speak, and then she is keeping the person being curious aware that there's something important going on here. And I want to make sure that we explore the opportunities in a way so we can make the best possible decision. If that is the case, then it's very rarely something that is delaying anything because it's an important aspect of whatever it is that we are busy doing. We will be doing it right and we will be doing the right things. So if that is the case, then I wouldn't worry about curiosity delaying something. If it's just to I like to play around, I just think, and it makes me sound smart, or I'm just someone who easily gets distracted or whatever, then of course it can be something that is delaying. And then you need, as a leader, to help whoever it is who is being curious in a way that's not helping, to help that person focus that curiosity. So it's not to kill the curiosity, it's to focus it. How do we use whatever it is that is keeping you energized? How do we use that to serve the purpose instead of just running in different directions?
This curiosity brings me to AI, because this is where this conversation get very current, right? A lot of people are talking about better prompts, and I get it. Better prompts matter, but I wonder if there is a trap there, because a better prompt can give us better output. That itself does not automatically mean we understood the problem better, right? Do you think better prompting can sometimes make us feel we're thinking better, because when we're really maybe just getting better outputs?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's a nice observation. I think it happens a lot. A lot of people are even. I found myself in arguments with people who really try to convince me that by using AI, they get better at asking questions and at solving problems and thinking, and they're very, very engaged in convincing me. And I try to stay fairly calm because I really don't think that's true. There is, I like to distinguish between prompting and asking or questioning, because in order to be good at prompting, you need to have a fairly good understanding of what it is that you want to achieve. You need to know the answer, so to speak. You need to know what would be within a scope that would make this make sense. It's kind of the opposite when asking good questions. When you ask a question from your question mindset, then you are moving into a territory where you actually don't have any idea necessarily. Maybe there isn't any answer at all. The best questions human beings ask are questions that don't have clear answers. That's the most important questions we ask. That's the questions like, why is this important? Who am I and where am I going? Who are the most important people in my life? And then we can come up with, one day we might say, well, that's definitely my kids and my husband, and it probably is most days, right? But then there can be moments where, who are the most important people right now for me to do what I need to do? Well, it's not my husband, it's my very good friend. And I need to reach out to her. So these questions that, again, the existential, ethical, epistemological questions, they are really, really, really important for us to be human, and they don't have clear answers. And for us to ask them, we need to be willing to do something completely different than prompting. And what I'm afraid is that all this talk about being good at prompting, or having these good answers and feeling more productive, they increase the space of prompting and they decrease the space of questioning. They make it harder for us to remember all the questions that AI cannot answer, all the questions that no machine will ever be able to help us deal with. We spend less and less time asking those questions and connecting with each other about these questions. So I would say that's that's one kind of risk, I guess.
Yeah, that was the distinction I was hoping we would get to, because better output, as you mentioned, can feel like progress. It's
Yes.
cleaner, sharper, more structured, more confident.
Yeah.
But then the deeper question is, did we think better, or did we just produce something better looking?
Yeah, exactly. And thinking from my perspective, from a philosophical perspective, from the tradition that I am inspired by, thinking has nothing to do with productivity or better outputs, or it has to do with practicing staying in the open space of not knowing. Because when we do that, again, it's back to the gap between what I know and what I would like to know. If that gap is closed, constantly closed, immediately by someone else or by something else, by the machine, then the space, again, the mind space, then the space for me to explore just collapses. It just closes down. So I need the gap. Sometimes it feels uncomfortable. People are talking about this blank slate, or I just use AI because I don't like looking at a blank sheet, and then I can get some inspiration. Yeah, but that's the biggest mistake you can make, because staring at a blank sheet is exactly what forces you to start thinking. And that's a big blind spot in the discussion we have today, that we think everything that feels uncomfortable, we can just use the machine there, and then we can be productive, and then we can produce the output that we want. Well, then you skip the most important part, which is where you made the decision of focusing on A instead of B. That was when the value was created. And we just totally skipped that.
And for leaders, that matters because
matters for everyone. Yeah.
A beautiful answer to the wrong question can create a very expensive kind of confidence.
Oh, yes. Yes. Yeah, that's true.
How should leaders know whether AI is helping them or just helping them produce faster?
That's a great question. I'm sorry that keeps being my answer, but I think everyone does know, but only if they have the time and the space in their head to ask the question you just asked. You can ask it of me. I can come up with my answer on how I work, what I do to make these distinctions. But the thing, and people can listen, the listener of your podcast, they can listen and they can think, well, I think that will work for me. But it doesn't change anything. If they, turn off the podcast afterwards and then they never create the space for them to hear their own question and hear their own thinking, then it doesn't make any difference. So I'm sorry, but that is my answer. The only answer to how can we be better at dealing with these problems is start by dealing with these problems. Start by facing them. Start by acknowledging I might have a problem. I might think that I can use AI for things that I can't. So now I'm going to start asking myself, every time I'm just about to use AI, I'm going to stop, and then I'm going to take a minute. I'm going to write down a question or a thought or talk to my colleague about whether or not that's a good idea. But that's not what people do right now. I shared a LinkedIn post, share a lot of LinkedIn posts about my new book. And one person was asking, how did you use AI? And that's where we are right now. We are at a point where people don't ask, did you use AI? They ask, how do you use AI? And I didn't use AI. I would never use AI for writing, because writing is closely connected to thinking for me, and thinking is closely related to being who I am and who I want to be. So I would never use AI for that. But I get the sense that a lot of people never ask the question you just asked. And it takes one thing for us to be able to answer it, and that is that each and every one of us ask it of ourselves.
And this is also where the language becomes important. We now say very casually that AI can think.
Yeah.
And I already know your opinion on this topic. I understand why people say it. On the other hand, the output can look thoughtful. It can look structured, and at the end of the day, it always looks confident, right? AI is built for that.
Yeah.
But in general, I'm not sure that this word is harmless. AI can think. So that's, or here's what I'm wrestling with. We've moved very quickly from AI helping with simple tasks to AI being treated almost like judgment nowadays. AI agents making recommendations, AI agents doing strategic work, AI agents behaving almost like senior operators in some companies. So, where do you think the line is between AI helping us and us pretending AI can carry judgment?
Using technology to help us do practical things that we think are just practical, and then leaving decisions or including it in making judgment where it has no chance of succeeding. We only have a chance of failing because we didn't use our judgment enough. And I think that's where the line is. It might be able to help me with a lot of things, but I should be very careful not to use it in situations where I will forget to take the responsibility and it will not be able to do it.
That's the line I think most of the leaders nowadays need to be super careful with, because it can be useful, right? AI,
Yeah.
but usefulness is not the same as authority. Someone still has to decide, right?
Yes, exactly. Do you think that leaders use AI as it is now? Do they use AI to assist them in making judgments?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Let's say you can upload 10 books, 10 PDFs, 200 pages each of best leadership coaches,
Mm-hmm.
Alex Hormozy, someone viral, right? And then ask ChatGPT or Claude to give you an answer based on these 10 books,
Yeah.
right? And a lot of people do it nowadays, and they rely on it
Yeah.
blindly in a way. LinkedIn is an AI playground
Yeah.
nowadays, right?
Yeah. 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 So, and do you think that the reason leaders are doing that is to avoid the workload, or is it to avoid making their own judgment, asking themselves the hard questions? Because what I noticed is that the difference between modern technology and digital technology is that we went from using technology to thrive, to speed up things, to be better at things. And in the digital age, it's like we're using technology to avoid doing things. It's like it's not to speed up our work, it's to avoid doing this work and avoid doing this task. Because then we have this idea that then we will free up time and that will make us be more happy. And it's like, well, what makes you happy is actually to prioritize. What is it that you want to spend your time on? And then actually do it. That's what makes human beings happy. But the story, the narrative is different, right? So what is it that most leaders are trying to avoid by using AI, do you
I'd
think?
say AI in general nowadays is like supplement industry, right? Or weight loss pills. I would say confidence, right? A lot of people are not so confident in their own knowledge. So they think they will have one up on their competitions
Ah.
by using the latest and greatest trick.
Ah. So
But the
but
problem
that's
is that
very
billion
interesting.
people is using the same trick nowadays and
Yeah.
everyone sounds the same. That's the problem. And
Yeah.
they think, oh, I added one sentence in my prompt, so it will sound different. But at the end of the day, that's where the biggest risk is, because AI does not remove judgment. It just makes it easier to confuse an answer with a decision,
Mm.
from my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. But I really like your analysis, but it's also very interesting if it is a matter of confidence. Most people probably wouldn't say that. They would probably say it's about, to save time. I could read those 10 books, but why and when should I do it? Do you know how busy I am? I can't, read that book. And that's why it's also important for me to say, no, but what you can do is make room for you to hear yourself think, because that doesn't take the same time as it does for you to read 10 books. But I think there's something interesting about your analysis of it being about confidence, because if that is true, then it actually doesn't matter about the speeding things up or saving time. None of that can be fixed, or confidence cannot be fixed by anything of that. Then you need something else, right? Then you don't need faster machines or wiser or smarter experts. It's something completely else you're lacking and needing if the issue is confidence.
There's something you said in a podcast that stayed with me. You said AI can and will never replace us. Cannot and will never replace us. And I think that sounds simple at first, right? But it's actually very deep, because a decision is never just the answer. It depends on my state, on my context, my constraints, my risk, and what I can actually carry at the moment. So when people say AI can make better decisions, I wonder what they are leaving out. So what do you think people miss about the human situation behind every decision?
Well, I think first of all, we need to make it very clear that AI doesn't make decisions. Decision making is a human thing. That's something we do because we know we are not here forever. We know we have limited time. We know we have limited space. We know that right now things are going on, in other parts of the house that we cannot see. So we have all these limitations, and we're very aware of that. So we know that we need to prioritize, and that's why we make decisions. We say, well, I'm going to do this instead of that. I'm going to value this and not that. And I think we forget that making decisions, having values, prioritizing, asking good questions, all these things come from us being limited creatures, come from us being conditioned and having a body and growing older and all these things. And that's what makes us decision makers. It's not that we are very intelligent or that it's simply that it's a physical need for us not to live a life without any meaning or purpose or direction. If we didn't make decisions, if we didn't have values, then our lives would make absolutely no sense. All these kind of discussions, everything I just said, is of absolutely no, it makes absolutely no sense in terms of talking about a machine. A machine is a machine. So I think it's very important actually to emphasize. We say that the machine can make decisions. No, it cannot. Making decisions is not about saying A instead of B. It's about why do we have a need for making decisions? What is driving us? What is the motivation? What is the purpose? And that is all human. So I think that's we need to understand that first of all.
An answer, as you said, an answer can be generated. A decision has to be carried by someone, not by the machine. And the person carrying it has a nervous system, role, a team, family, deadline, and consequences as well, right?
Yes.
AI
exactly.
may support the answer at the end of the day, but it does not carry that human load.
For a machine, I sometimes think about it. I just saw a video. It's an old one where Mark Zuckerberg is asked to apologize. He's in court, and the senator is asking him, why, what's going on? All these people are. Some lose their kids for using your platforms, and some get very ill, and you have all these families sitting here. Do you want to apologize, right? And he's like, well, I think it's he doesn't really know what to do. He's acting like a machine, because you can have a machine say, I'm sorry, but the I'm sorry to someone who lost their daughter is exactly the same as the I'm sorry to I asked you to put pepper instead of paprika. in the dish you just made. I'm sorry, that was a mistake. If I have done something that caused someone else to lose their daughter, my life would be ruined. I would never be the same person again. That's what being human means. I would probably, the rest of my life would be shaped in the color and the shape of having caused the death of someone else that way. It would I would never be the same. Everything would change. Whereas if I had asked you to put pepper instead of paprika in your sauce, I would say, sorry, hope you're okay. Better luck next time, listen to someone else. It would be something completely, and then I would move on. And that difference it's like we completely forget that all the things we do with and for each other is something completely different than what a machine can ever do. So even if you teach it to be sorry, to sound sorry, you cannot ruin its life because it doesn't have a life. So it's not going to die, right? So it doesn't have all these, again, limitations which is what connects us to the world we're part of, connects us to the existential and the ethical aspects of being human, and forces us to constantly evolve, constantly adapt to our surroundings. It's not a choice we make. It's not a strategy we make. It's how we live this life. If we stop doing that, we stop living. So comparing the two makes absolutely no sense to me.
Yeah, and it changes the whole conversation, because the quality of the decision is not only was the answer good, it's also can this person actually act on it? Can this team absorb it? And what happens if this is wrong?
Yeah, exactly.
And
as I see it,
connects to another concern I have. I don't think the biggest danger with AI is simply ignorance. I think it may be ignorance without humility.
Yeah.
Because AI can give people language, structure, arguments, summaries, and confidence very quickly, right? So someone can sound informed before they've really understood the problem. And for leaders, that can be dangerous, not because AI is bad, but because it can make overconfidence very cheap. And so what happens to judgment when people can produce expert-sounding answers without going through the friction that usually creates real understanding?
Well, it just disappears. The judgment, you just leave it out of the equation. And then you might as well not have humans in the loop, right? Because that is our license to communicate. That is our license to be here. That is the judgment. That is the decision. That is the A instead of B. Are you sure? No, I'm not sure, but I need to make a decision now because we need to move forward. And in this moment, A instead of B. And I'm taking the responsibility. I'm living with the consequences. I did the best I could under the circumstances. And the best news, if it turns out that A is terrible, then I'm going to change my mind. That's judgment.
Growth.
Sorry?
And growth as well, right?
Yeah.
When you learn a lesson by doing something.
Yeah.
Because AI gives you the language of expertise nowadays very quickly, right? But on the other hand, it does not automatically give you the burden of understanding.
Yeah, I think we should be way better at distinguishing overall. A lot of distinctions. We need more distinctions. But in this case, we should be way better at distinguishing between expertise and experience. Because AI can sound like an expert, but AI cannot have experience. And it's the experience that makes the difference of whether you are acknowledging, now I don't have the quick answers. I can get the quick answers very quickly from the quick machine, Or I could say, well, that might be an invitation. That might be an invitation for me to make a judgment, to think, to do some research, to explore, to discuss things with people around me before making the judgment. This might be an invitation because I have an experience telling me that when there's something I don't know, then my job is to learn and grow, not to jump to easy conclusions. And I cannot have a machine learn and grow for me. It will just collect more data, but I will not learn and grow by having that. So it's a win-lose situation. The machine wins because it gets more data from me about when am I insecure, when am I not confident, when do I need someone to help me. The machine will learn from all of that, but I will learn absolutely nothing. I will build absolutely no experience in dealing with what comes around again and again and again, namely the feeling of not knowing. And that's an invitation.
And sometimes people genuinely need more information and data,
Yeah.
right? But
Yeah.
sometimes more information is just a safer place to stand because
Yeah.
data feels natural, analysis feels responsible,
Yeah.
another
Yeah.
meeting feels careful, but none of that fixes an unclear owner.
No.
Let's say
No.
more data
Exactly.
does not fix unclear owner, and more answers do not fix unclear question.
Yeah, that's perfectly put.
At some point, the issue is not do we know everything? It is, do we know enough for someone to responsibly decide?
Yeah.
I would phrase
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
So
Exactly. Exactly. The enough word is really, really important here because we will never know everything. And that's not the job. It's to know enough, to feel capable of taking responsibility and also taking responsibility for not knowing enough, for saying, right now, I don't feel confident. I don't feel comfortable making this decision. So we might be very busy. People might expect something from us, but I'm gonna, spend another 20 minutes or do another phone call. Because that is the responsible thing for me to do right now. It's not to look responsible, it's to be responsible and face that gap again.
there's a very human part of this that I want to ask you about, because the people I care about reaching are often really capable people, CEOs, founders, senior people. And capable people are tricky because they can carry a lot. They're used to it, sometimes too much. Why, in general, why is it so hard for smart people to ask the question that would expose the real problem here?
Because it exposes them as well. That is the short answer. You cannot ask a question that truly makes a difference without being willing to expose yourself as someone who doesn't know. So if you have this picture of yourself and you think your surroundings expect that of you, then that's just too dangerous.
I mean, that's what it makes this hard, right? The pain still looks like competence from the outside.
Yeah.
So nobody ever intervenes, and the leader keeps absorbing what the system maybe should have learned to handle.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
I'm not trying to tell leaders they're broken. I'm trying to give language to the load they've been calling normal.
I think I talk to a lot of people who they start out maybe by complaining or being feeling some pressure because of their leaders behaving the way they do. But when you talk to them, pretty soon they start feeling a little bit sorry for the leaders, not seeing that they are not protecting anyone by not protecting themselves. That's the same with parents. That's the same with coaches. And, if we don't know how to take care of our own mind, our own body, our own time, our own life, then chances are we are not helping people around us. And that can just, we convince ourselves that I'm doing everything I do and I'm doing because of everybody else or for everybody else. But if I'm dying inside while doing it, then chances are I'm killing a lot of life around me as well.
Yeah, and this is where it becomes very practical in companies, because when questions are unclear, decisions usually move upward. And eventually, the CEO becomes the place where all unresolved stuff lands.
Mm.
And is there one question you wish more leaders would ask before they let AI dashboards or experts answer for them?
There's not one question. There's never just one question. It takes Einstein. I'm not sure whether it's right, but he's sometimes quoted for saying that if he had an hour and he had to solve a problem and his life depended on the solution, then he's supposed to have said that he would spend 55 minutes determining the proper question. Because if he knew what the proper question was, he would be able to solve the problem in 5 minutes. So there's never just one question. We need to be more patient with our question mindset. We need to be willing to ask a lot of really bad questions, not of ChatGPT, but of ourselves. It's like we're willing to ask a lot of bad prompting questions, and then we reach a point where we say, oh, now I know how to prompt you, so now I can get what I want. But we are not willing to ask ourselves a lot of questions and say, I might need to ask questions for another 20 minutes or another half an hour or another day before I know what question it is that I need to work on. Another example, more up to date than Einstein, is that at some point I had the great pleasure of working with a team in Audi, and a consultant in Germany who was working for Audi, and he was using some of the software that I invented and developed. So I got a chance to work with this company as well and to work with this team as well. And this consultant, he very wisely asked the leader to consider some questions to figure out, what is it that it's truly important for me before I take off on this big strategic journey involving my entire organization. I need to do some work first. And then he planned on a really long walk. I think it took most of the day, where he just walked and walked and walked to figure out the answers to the questions he had been asked, like, who am I as the executive? Why should people follow me? These kind of questions. And at the end of the day, when he had been walking and walking and walking, he realized that he didn't have the answers. And instead of being very uncomfortable and feeling, oh my God, who am I? I'm the worst leader ever. I don't have the answers to why people should follow me. He had spent the walk building confidence in, that's probably why people should follow me, because I'm okay with being the one not knowing the answers. I'm okay with taking the responsibility and inviting others to join the discussion without being sure that all my answers are the right answers or all my questions are the right questions. So I really think that no, there are no one question. We need to figure out, what is my question? What is it that I need to work on?
Questions shape what people see, right?
Yeah.
And in a world of AI responses, that becomes even more important because answers are getting faster. But at the end of the day, responsibility is not going away. When answers get cheap, questions get expensive, right? So, Pia, I'm really glad we had this conversation.
Me too.
Because I think you make questions feel serious, as I mentioned, without making them heavy. And for me, the easiest version of this is that leaders should ask better questions, and that is true, but it is not enough. The more useful version is questions shape what people see, as I mentioned, what they avoid, and who eventually owns the decision. And that matters even more now in today's day and age with AI. What is the one big thing you want and wish all people to understand about questions that they usually learn too late?
Most people think of questions only in relation to answers. So they think the quality of a question or the value or the impact of a question depends on the answer, when in fact questions have so many other purposes and impactful roles to play. And if we're not aware of that, then it just does it without us noticing. It's not like the question doesn't have the impact. It just has a huge impact that we're not aware of, for better and for worse. Because just like we can use questions for amazing things, if we're not aware of what they're doing, they can do a lot of damage. Like, as we talked about, manipulation and all kinds of focus shifts that are not in our own interest. Questions are monopolized. I don't know if you noticed, but I flipped the script during this conversation where I started asking you a question.
Yeah,
Typically,
I noticed. I like that part, actually.
Typically, that's not what we do when we're being interviewed, right?
Yeah.
Then we have these, and it's back to the dancing. To have good conversations, we need to shift positions. We need to take turns. And I think we forget that when we only think of questions as a warm-up to the answer. But questions are so powerful. So I think most people realize that too late or never realize how often we actually have the opportunity to take control over a conversation or a situation simply by flipping the question power, simply by saying, wait a minute, this is not what I think we should be going right now. Or you ask me, what is the one question leaders should ask yourself? Well, I actually have the opportunity to say, there is no one. You made an assumption, I disagree. So learning to pay attention to how questions work is something that most people simply don't do.
Exactly. And then also, before I let you go, where can people learn more about your work?
Well, there is the book. So this questions book published by Johns Hopkins University Press. I have a website, pialauritzen.dk, and I have a Forbes column. I write regularly for Forbes. And then I'm very active on LinkedIn. So that's where I share what I do and my reflections and latest news and stuff like that.
Amazing. We'll share all the links. And where can people reach out to you, find your work? Again, thank you very much. We went a bit longer than it was planned, but so sorry for that part. But I had a lot of questions to actually cover with you after listening to a few of your podcasts. So thank you for staying longer with me.